Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cosmic Chats, the mindful conversation. Today, we have a fabulous entrepreneur, Kevin McCracken. Say hey, Kevin.
Hello, how are you? Nice to see you, Paula.
And you too. Oh, we have Kevin, who is in the Bay Area, who is a entrepreneur, a double podcaster at the moment. One that's very successful is the Adulting Well podcast, and the second one is called
Death by Incarceration.
Death by Incarceration. And we might get into a little bit as to why someone would spend more energy starting a second podcast.
Well, it just fell into my lap. So, and it deals with the things that I do at work. So my business hires and trains individuals that are returning citizens from incarceration. And the podcast is about the criminal justice system. So it kind of, it's kind of full circle for me. So, when the opportunity arose and we had a network pick us up, I couldn't say no.
So that's how he's beginning to give back. But first of all, we want to remind you, please like and subscribe. Now, we also want to help build up the community here. If you have a YouTube page that you want to have some people take a look at and subscribe, why don't you pop that in the comments and say, hey, I've just subscribed, check out my page, and we can start supporting each other in a community, and also any questions you might have for Kevin. So let's get to the first one. How would you describe the taste of a banana to someone who's never eaten one?
Well, I would say it's sweet, but it has some sort of earthy overtones.
Earthy overtones, like mud.
Yeah, but not quite mud, maybe more like dirt. Just a little bit of earth in there. And definitely it's a very texture-based experience. So you don't want one that's too dark on the outside, but you don't want one that's too green on the outside either. Otherwise, it's just going to be either mush or too hard to even enjoy, but it's very sugary and sweet. And if you need a boost, it also gives you a little bit of a boost.
So it sounds like, Kevin, you are the Goldilocks of bananas.
I am. Yeah. Not too sweet, not too bitter, somewhere in between.
Do you like to sit on small chairs when you have your bananas?
Once in a while, yes. We have small chairs in my household. I have a 3-year-old, so there are small chairs, and he likes bananas.
Right. Anyone not like them?
Caitlin doesn't eat a lot of bananas, so my older daughter is not a huge banana fan.
All right.
No, fair enough.
So the next one, when did you have your first existential life crisis as a child?
Boy, I would say the one that I can remember, I was probably in about the 5th grade. So what is that?
10,
11. We had moved to a new town, and I didn't understand that sometimes the new kids got picked on. So I found out quickly that there's bullies in class. So I realized that maybe I didn't quite understand the world the way that I thought I did. Lucky for me, when you're that young, it's not like a serious thing. It's just kind of especially in those days. I mean, I'm 50, so it wasn't the bully situation wasn't then what it is now. So I just had to kind of realize that, I needed to be a little more careful in the world, and I was a little shocked. But all things worked out well, and I ended up with some good friends out of the whole deal. So
the shock factor.
Yes.
The shock factor, of course, other people think and behave differently to myself.
Yes.
Did you change your personality or behavior as a result?
I don't know that I changed so much as I just became a little more cautious. It didn't need to share that I was the new kid in town as much anymore. But, as far as, understanding human nature a little bit better, it led me to a lifelong kind of pursuit of why people react to uncomfortable or new situations the way they do. Which obviously I had my own problems with that at different points in my life where I didn't react quite maybe the way that society would have expected me to in certain situations, or the way that people around me did. So, it really, I don't know if it changed my personality as much as it did just make me understand that we're all different. We all come from unique places.
And did you have a period in your teenage years that you threw caution to the wind?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I was definitely the rebellious teenager. I was one that cut school and, took off in the middle of the day and just did what I wanted and, smoked weed and drank and did all that stuff that wild teenagers do. But it also led me on some great adventures because I ended up doing some really fun things. I started joining bands and, touring the US and, doing really interesting stuff that I don't think if I had been more cautious, I would have been able to do and experience. So when I say I was more cautious around giving myself out in terms of my emotional side, but definitely from the physical and sort of like, let's go do it. I was a kind of a jumper inner, so definitely my teenage years were pretty remarkable. I have to say. I got to spend some of that time in an area outside of Detroit, Michigan, and then back in my hometown of Santa Rosa, California. So, it was definitely, I feel like I had a unique teenage time in my life.
And then that shifted to reality.
Yes.
And was there, well, as the movie says, reality bites. Was there
does.
that typical Gen X awakening of this is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think mine came from of my own making. Definitely, I was and I don't mind sharing. I was a substance abuser. I was a drug addict and an alcoholic. That really started late in my late teens and early 20s, and kind of through my mid 20s, I ended up making some choices that landed me in places that I don't recommend, county jails and rehabs and other stuff. And so, the kind of free for all party time of my teenage years came back to bite, as you said, reality bites. And I didn't quite understand when I was getting into drinking and other things what it actually meant, given my mental and emotional makeup and the history of my family, what that was going to do to me later on. Good news is though, that, if you're a seeker and you want to change, there are opportunities to do that as well. So, I feel like I've lived multiple lives in my 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as
And I will say I've enjoyed aspects of every one of them, looking back on them.
yes, you're now after we're all coming out of COVID.
Mhm.
What did COVID bring about for you that you even changed your perception?
Well, I am, along with my proclivity for being addicted to things, I am, I work too much, and it's sort of it's a typical story, right? You go from drug addict or alcoholic to workaholic, and it's a good way to sort of cushion your feelings a little bit and build a little padding around you. And so what's happened for me in working from home, especially, and you may hear my 3-year-old in the background. I have a 3-year-old and a 12, almost 13-year-old going on 25. And what it did for me was it really actually brought my relationship with them much closer and made me really appreciate the time that I have with them. And COVID has been a different experience for everybody. Obviously we all have sort of our own influences and the things that sort of make us tick. But what it did for me was force me to slow down a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
I was telling my wife this morning, like, I am just madly in love with my children right now. Like, I just really have enjoyed this time, and it makes me very tentative to go back to the office in a full-time position again. I want to keep a couple of days at home where I can pick up my son from school and pick up my daughter from school, and and be there and hang out, and and be not so distracted all the time. And we all, we're lucky enough to have a practice that keeps us grounded, or at least in relative contact with the greater universe. But it's really easy for me to get distracted and kind of sidetracked and sort of lose track of those things that are really truly important and that feed my mental, emotional, and spiritual growth. And I'm finding my children and my family members are one of those things right now. And I don't want to give that up. I'm really going to be selfish about it, And so COVID has been for me an opportunity to slow down and really look at the life that I built from the vision of gratitude, and I used to say a lot that I'm grateful, but I don't know really if I'd felt into that in a true and meaningful way. And I don't want to get too airy about it either. Like, the fact of the matter is that I have a very fortunate set of circumstances. And I will say that from where I've come from to where I am now, my participation in building these set of circumstances has been, full stop. Like I am all in. But I've also had a lot of help along the way, from teachers, from individuals that have offered me their time at no cost other than my own time to, contribute to. But I never really felt like until the last 16 months that I truly appreciated the journey, and where I am right now. And so, again, I don't want to get too airy about it either. Like I live in a fantastic part of the world in a wonderful house with an amazing family. And so, I feel like I've been able to step back a little bit from the grind and say, oh my God, look at this. It's amazing. So that's what I got out of COVID.
Let's talk a little bit about the grounding practice. I always ask people, and then you are a meditator in the same tradition that I happen to teach.
Yes.
Let's talk about how you got to that, because it sounds like you weren't a person who would ever think of meditating as just the idea that it's a little out there.
Yeah. So what happened for me around meditation was it was sort of a force of circumstance to some degree. So I spent the better part of my sort of mid-late 20s, 26, 27, 28, either under the care of the county or the state, or, through incarceration or in rehabilitation programs. And I never really understood why I kept going back, and so I started noticing the people that were locked up that seemed like they weren't locked up so much, that they were like kind of free amongst, incarcerated people, and started asking questions. Many of them were Buddhists. Many of them were Muslims that had very strong prayer practices. Many of them were Christians who had very strong prayer and meditation practices. And I was like, boy, I better start trying this stuff, And so I did some Buddhist meditation in jail. I was lucky enough to be in a program during my last little stint, my last 8 months or so. But nothing ever really fully clicked for me, quite honestly. And so at a 12-step meeting one night, I just heard a guy talking, and I just really I was like, oh my gosh, that guy makes sense to me. And part of his practice was the exact same practice that we're talking about. And he was a longtime meditator, and he didn't ever force me to do his type of meditation. He just strongly recommended it, and said, this is what's worked for me. And that is, I do really well with people that don't force their will on me, and say that this is the only way, I get real, I can get real, kind of, I will recoil from, being forced to do anything. And I didn't really have a lot of options left. So when he said, this is what I do, and asked me to at least investigate through an orientation, I said, sure. And that's, been the last 20 plus years of my continuous recovery, so I've been abstinent for 22, almost 23 years. And at about a year and a half, I learned how to meditate from a teacher who had learned from a teacher who had learned from a teacher, and so on and so forth. And it has been something that, over the years has been something, even when my practice isn't as strong as I feel it should be, I always have the tool to go back to no matter what circumstance I'm in. And I will say that after I learned, I was actually locked up one more time for an old warrant. And I understood what those men that I'd spent time with in jails before did in terms of where they went, because I had a practice to turn to. And I got to leave my physical realm and go into something and tap into something greater around me. And again, I don't like to get too airy about it, but the fact of the matter is I did not feel like I was locked up. I felt like I was as free as any man on the planet at that very moment. And so that experience stuck with me, and, and it's something that carries me through, quite honestly, because I can always take a breath and go back to that and say, where have I always found my guidance? And so that is the place.
Those of you who don't know much about what he's talking about, you'll see behind me, there's an image of the book, Vedic Meditation Stories. And those of you who are purely listening, it is an ebook right now, Vedic Meditation Stories. And the book is the only resource globally of true stories from individuals who learnt this practice in their own words. The majority of them are actually from underrepresented groups. And part of the mission statement of Aware Meditation is going to those underrepresented groups in the wellness community and going in the communities to bring large teachings of people over a weekend. So anyone can get that. If you have right now unlimited, I think it's Prime, you get unlimited Kindle or a book a month, you can actually watch it for free or read it for free. And it has a little synopsis about what the meditation is, a little bit about Aware Meditation, but the stories of people in their own voices. And they will go from PhD people to individuals who had a very dramatic story like Kevin. And we encourage everyone to check that out. The link is in the description, and that will be updated if the resource is somewhere else. And this is a great opportunity for you to read the truth. And exactly as Kevin said, no one's pushing anyone to have to do anything. You simply investigate it. And you've always got our email there if you happen to want to find someone near you that can teach that as well. So you've done this for 20 plus years. That's quite phenomenal. Have you done anything that long in your life?
No, I've actually, I can't think of anything. Maybe play drums, but even that has had some long lapses. So yeah, I didn't even use and drink that long, when I was doing that. So I think the only other thing is that I've been continuously sober, but that is not necessarily, there's actions that lead to that versus it being an actual action, right? So no, I can't think of anything. I was just commenting about like waking up really early in the morning and having time to myself when there's no activity in the house, and how nice that is. Because I read a story once about Sonny Berger from the Hells Angels, and that at San Quentin, when he had learned how to do meditation, that it was that twice a day for 20 minutes was the only time the cell block was quiet. Because Sonny was doing his meditation. So, I'm like, I wish I had 20 minutes twice a day that was actually quiet in my house. But if I get up early, I do, so there you go.
Well, it's also the response to what's happening outside. So part of what happens with meditation practice that goes on regularly through one's life, the fight or flight response. And if you have been locked up, then the fight or flight response is going to be a little bit dialed up when you come out, and quite rightly so. That when that diminishes, then even if there are lots of noises going on, there is not the kick jolt within to start wondering what's happening. And then the mind starts saying, I can't meditate, it's no good. And I talk about this, it's systemic meditationism. That part of what I do is break down people's idea of what they think meditation is and who they think they have to be in order to do it. The word comes from the Latin monks, and that was for them to concentrate, but it was around before the 13th century. So that it's not always that same focusing element. And there's basically two branches of it, concentration and non-directive. And Kevin does a non-directive practice that he stuck to. I couldn't stick to anything that long, but the meditation has helped.
Well, now it's interesting too that you mentioned that, because when I was living in the Sunset District of San Francisco and working downtown, I did not drive because it was too expensive. So I took the train in every morning and found peace on the train, both directions, through meditation practice that is not the non-concentration version of meditation. And so you can do it anywhere, really. And again, this isn't a sales pitch for anything. This is simply what's worked for me over the years, and I've been lucky to have it, quite honestly. And it's for people that think that you need a certain, you have to have a certain room or any of that other stuff, that is just categorically false. You can really do this anywhere. And It's just an amazing, it's really a great practice for people like you mentioned that are telling the stories, marginalized individuals, because we don't have the privilege necessarily to be away from people. And I kind of jokingly talk about the silence thing because that's what people connect to. But the fact of the matter is it's a anytime, anywhere practice, and that's the deal. So
The idea that silence is required is it's backwards. When we have less stress and we are less at the effect of fight or flight, and we are content and inwardly connected, there is a natural silence. We don't have to talk as much. Right. We feel okay. And what's happened, as we do in the West, we decided to take the outcome and make that, how do we make that outcome? So if we don't have that outcome, we're failing, rather than looking at the fact that if you've got a lot of stress and lots of stuff going on, the stuff coming up is not producing silence, because that's what's happening. You've got other stuff going on. So, yes, you can hear people on the tram outside, but is it bothering you? Right? Like everything, is it bothering you? And even if it does in meditation, the science proved it still works. It still works. And that was definitely my my experience. I tried so many things. Now I can do some guided meditations. I quite like them, but I couldn't before.
Yeah. I love them now. I love them. I think that I actually have the Calm app, and I have some other things, and my wife has always done guided meditations for years and years and years with her mom. And, I love it when she'll throw something on her little, to play for us to kind of go through. It's amazing. And there's no way 20 years ago I would even consider. I would just be like thinking in my head, when is this going to be over? What's this voice,
Who do they think they are? Because a lot of them always want an English accent. So it's the channel from the head to the heart, right? And we start clearing out that channel that we can connect within, because we've got that grounded anchor through the mantras that we use. Now, you've actually spent most of your sobriety giving back in many ways through either jobs or volunteer work. Let's talk a little bit about what brought that to you, that you wanted to do that and help other people.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So to set up the context a little bit, my father was basically volunteered for an organization in my hometown until COVID hit, after his retirement. And he passed away almost a year ago, not of COVID, of something else, that he'd been sick a long time. But so it was sort of like part of growing up. Like, my parents were incredibly welcoming in their house. Like, my dad knew no strangers. So, like the first Thanksgiving my parents spent together married, he went to the store to pick up some wine and came back with two guys that were going to have frozen dinners that were in the military to come over for dinner with them. And that's kind of how my household always was. It was like the home of wayward kids, right? Like, whoever was there. And that was, that was kind of how they worked. And so I always had this sort of deep and, and sort of this deep love and connection to, feeling like community was the most important thing. And so as I was given opportunities to grow my own community and, sort of be a part of something greater, I felt like this pull constantly to want to do the same. And I got a lot of assistance. I'm not a bootstraps guy by any means. I asked for help and I got it. And I had to also accept it once it was offered. And I don't believe that people do things on their own. I know that that's a great fairy tale in the United States, but I think the fact of the matter is that there's two components to it. There's a willingness to accept the help, and there's also like the ability to ask for it, right? And that's on the person that needs it. There's also has to be a willingness on the other side, and that's where I feel like I have been given the great fortune to have that ability to help people. And so when I look at my life, it's not about accolades or, someone saying, oh, wow, great job, Kev. Thanks for helping so many people. It's really about a responsibility to let people have the space to feel like they're a part of something greater. How they choose to be an actor in that is going to be up to them. But is that if the space is there, if it's offered, if the help is there and people choose it, then they have a choice, right? If they come and they do it, they have a choice at that point. Many of us are sort of not given an opportunity, and we talk in my business and fair chance employment about second chances, but it's really not a second chance for many people. For marginalized communities, a lot of times it's a first chance because they were given a set of circumstances as a child, with either one or more parents incarcerated, one or more parents addicted to drugs, one or more parents not in the home. So that's not the fault of the child, but it does set up generational trauma. So knowing that, I have an obligation, in my opinion, and this is only for me, and I'm not telling other people to do what I do, to offer help when I see an opportunity to do so. And so it's been greatly influenced by people in, groups like AA and NA, who one of the obligations that, or one of the kind of the tenets that they read about is when someone reaches out, that I'm there. The hand of AA is always there. Or, when there's an addict somewhere asking for help, that help is offered to them. And so I think it goes along with all of the learnings, and I think part of what it does for me, and this is the selfish part of it, is that it reminds me constantly of where things could be in my life, and where they were. Because I don't honestly, the interesting thing is I tell my story for connection to those that are new in some way, right? I don't tell it because I'm not connected to it anymore. I don't feel like the same person I was 22 years ago on any level. There's certain personality traits that have not gone away, and I don't know if they ever will, which I'm okay with. But how I react to life and how I kind of put forth the energy around, the people around me is a completely different person. And I don't think I would feel fulfilled or satisfied without the opportunity to give back, and this is where I am. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And, I think the one thing that I will say is I need to become better at saying no. We talked about boundaries before we started the the discussion, and I think that where I am remiss is in having boundaries, with certain people in my life. Absolutely. If I believe, or someone has given me the signs that they're toxic, I probably am not going to spend a lot of time with them, because there has to be some desire. I say bootstraps and desire are two very different things. If you have the desire to be non-toxic, then I'm here to help. If you want to continue on your path and, steal and lie and do the things that go along with many of the people that I work with issues, I'm probably not the best person to help, but that's my boundary. That's for me, right? Because I also don't want to get sucked into something that's a dangerous situation for me. I am easily attracted to things that are unhealthy, so I need to be ever vigilant for my own well-being, and it plays out in different ways when you've been sober a long time, right? Sex, gambling, money, right. Whatever, I mean, it's all the same. It's all systemically the same thing. It just plays out in different behaviors. So
what do you hope to leave when your body drops as part of making the world a better place than when you got here?
Well, I mean, quite honestly, they're already here. So, my hope is that my children are, giving and compassionate and connected members of this community of ours, and when I say community, I mean all of us, and I've made choices in my life that I think, if we're talking about ancient practices, connect with the idea of ahimsa, and, let's, as little harm as we can do to those around us should be our goal, whether it's our fellow human beings or sentient beings that are traveling this planet with us, and I'm not saying this from a place of being rendered a saint. I'm saying this from a place of being an incredibly flawed human being. But I find the less harm that I do to those around me, the better I feel, and so walking in that path has meant a lot to me. And that, and that doesn't always jive with my ideal of that, doesn't always jive with other people's ideals, especially I've noticed lately other meditators and other people, especially in the wellness community, we don't necessarily agree on what that looks like.
Exactly.
And that's okay. The difference between me and a lot of other people is I'm totally willing to have that conversation. If I reach out to you though, and I say, hey, I am troubled by something that you're saying, and I do it on a personal level, and you don't want to respond to that or can't, that's not my responsibility at that point. And I will say, maybe all bets are off. I might come back with a different version of my sort of reaction to what you're doing if you can't have a conversation with me. And I'm speaking in the age of social media where people put out a lot of things, but maybe aren't so necessarily willing to have that discussion personally. And I can give a very, very precise example of this because it happened yesterday. I went to the Marin farmers market yesterday with my family, and there was a woman walking around in the farmers market where it's a private event. The space is rented by an organization, and they wanted people to wear masks. There was people outside protesting that, which is fine. And I agree with, if you have an opinion, it is your obligation to speak that opinion, whether I believe it's right or wrong. But she decided to go in and film other people and talking to, basically say, you're all a bunch of slaves, And so at that point, she had entered into what I thought was a safe space for individuals that were in alignment in their opinions about what should be happening with a crowd at that point, So I questioned her about it, and I came to find out that she didn't believe viruses existed at all. She claimed to be a doctor, and I asked her for her license number. She didn't want to give it to me, but she showed me her card. She was indeed a doctor of chiropractic, and not a medical doctor, which is fine. Again, that's her opinion, So we had an exchange about different viruses, which she said were all not real. And I can connect to that to some degree, because if we're talking in the realm of spiritual, then we're on a different realm, but in the world of the actual physical world we live in, I think that that's a problem. So what I noticed when I was leaving was she had a sign that connected masks to slavery. That I had an issue with. So I had a conversation with her and probably 4 of her friends all coming at me at one time. And I didn't get angry, which is rare for me when I'm getting
that must be the meditation working.
Yes, on my heels. But it was interesting to see, I am not one that will hold back in person. It was interesting to be around other people that felt the same way, because most of these arguments are had online now.
Yes.
Most of these interactions are had online. And although I wasn't happy with their response and didn't agree with them, I will say that part of it was satisfying in that I actually got to say it out loud in a group of people with a lot of other people watching us, because no one else wanted to speak up, and basically say something that meant, was important to me, which was, it is incredibly, to me, disingenuous to connect free people asking other free people to wear a mask in a private setting to one of the greatest atrocities in the history of the world, slavery. And I think it's racially insensitive if I'm being on a nice day, and I think it's flatly racist on a bad day. And so especially standing in front, probably 100 yards away from the entrance to the county jail in Marin, I just thought it was an interesting choice of words. So I was able to express that loud and clear and stand up and call people out based on my belief system. And they were allowed, with no threat of violence or, obviously we're posting each other's pictures online because she posted mine as well. So that was the biggest threat, but the fact of the matter is that being able to have those conversations in person and having the wherewithal to be honest without being purposely hurtful is important to me. And that goes into that broader context of ahimsa.
Yes.
I'm not trying to harm you, but I am going to tell you that I think what you're saying is a little obscene.
Well, agree to disagree and be able to have a conversation where everyone is respected for their views without attempting to control another individual. And this is where the fear comes in, right? And if we are preserving ourselves, we're going to get high emotions, and there's going to be a response back, and people are not seen and not heard. And when that happens, we get polarization, which is definitely what's been happening globally when it comes to political candidates getting voted in, which is run by fear. And as that, so it's perpetuating a cycle. So some people might look at it, and let's be honest, they're going to say, look at those bunch of snowflake liberals doing this and having splitting hair discussion, and they're, you know, at each other's throats about this. There are bigger fish to fry. But it boils down to the lack of discernment and ability to commune globally, right, for the better good of others outside of ourselves, right? So the big better good is we're going to see if Gen Z can pick this up as a generation with other generations, as they're the youngest ones, for the global change of the planet. Because if we don't take care of the land, we will not continue to be here.
Well said. My wife said the same thing. Actually, she said, you know, basically, she commented on the people protesting and said, this is all well and good, but the fact of the matter is the biggest problem is it has nothing to do with any of this, that we are not being stewards of this earth.
Right. And that comes from, we can absolutely do all the philanthropic endeavors we need to, but unless we start changing the consciousness of individuals one-on-one, they live outside of fight or flight, none of this will make any difference. Because I can believe in this theoretically, but suddenly if I cannot put food on the table, the fight or flight, the Hunger Games element within us will come up and out unless there is training for us to be able to do that. And this is where Kevin is on board with it as well. The difference with a practice that he does for 20 minutes twice a day is it resets that nervous system and starts to print out a physical cellular memory of not living in fight or flight. And when that occurs, no matter what trauma you've been through, there is an ability to observe an event occurring, and it's not a threat to you. And when that happens, there is a space for conversation. And that's what we want to start being able to do, is on a larger scale, helping people have a practice. Yes, it's called meditation, but what really it is a technique to help the nervous system go from fight or flight twice a day and not start printing out a physiology. Because if the body is off kilter, the mind cannot be with it. Our nervous system's erect, and then we have the ability to see more foresight, right? The ability to see beyond the first basic need, right? That inspiration, then that feels fulfilling. No one's relying on other people. Like, people are together because they want to be together, like you say, by choice rather than your will. Right, the attraction of that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some fun questions with Kevin. But in the meantime, pop down if you agree or disagree. Let's keep that forum going in the comments for our particular chat today. And if you feel like you want to help us with our endeavor, just go to the website where you can donate time, volunteer, or services. You know, finances are great, or even maybe let's start us getting the book published so people who don't have electronic devices can read it. There's so much to do, and start us as our endeavor, which is part of the 17 goals for the world to make it a better place, which is changing the consciousness of the humans that walk upon it. Not too big a goal. Okay. All right, with that, we'll say cheerio, and we'll see you in a wee bit. Bye.